thus far. So all the stuff that we talked about, I mean, I don't think these are going to go away, okay? And you know, there are many, many things, right? So there's this new product called Excel on steroids. It's a brand new product. It's out. It's the Viagra version of Excel. It's very, very good. And people are selling it too, by the way. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I think the issue is, right, people always talk about, oh, we got to improve operations, reduce risk and fraud, automate compliance. But the tools and technologies they're beginning to use, regardless of the people that, you know, if you think about, let's say, an HR person, right, who does payroll audits, for example, if you ask them what they're truly worried about, they won't come out and tell you that they're worried about paying dead people, right? Which we've actually found happen in very large companies. We've found companies that have been paying people that don't work there anymore. I don't know if you recently saw a couple of weeks ago the 60-minute show about fraud in Medicare. Did any of you catch that recently? It's a fascinating story, and the beautiful thing about that 60-minute story was how simple it was, wasn't it? I mean, if you folks get a chance, and what amazed me was when they interviewed the individual. I hope she's not here. No, I don't know. She's not here, I'm sure. She said, this is what she said. I might get the numbers slightly wrong, but I think, you know, to make the point here, which is that we do over $460 billion of Medicare payments every year. What's wrong with $60 billion missing? 60 billion compared to 460, we write a lot of checks. So yeah, we expect that to be a part of our system. Now, that's an incredibly shocking sentiment. And what bothered me again was, you know, I think the week later I actually met the individual who actually was responsible for Medicare payments. And he said, oh, you know, they're doing this, it's a big value chain, and they're in the final gate, right? There are a lot of checks and balances. And the final gate is where they actually do the checking, right? So they check the bill that's come in, and then the actual check that needs to be written, that needs to get sent out. And when I told him, hey, did you watch it? He said, yeah, I watched it. I said, do you think there's a problem with it? And he said, no. I said, why don't you believe there's a problem with it? He said, look, we expect, right, he said there are like 15 people before in his whole value chain that should worry about it. He said if it passes through 15 people and I'm the 16th guy who's going to write the check, I'm just going to assume it's the right check to write. So it's the other 14 people's problem, not my problem. I said, you got to be kidding me. So there's no accountability, right? Or even though you have multiple stakeholders, there's very, very little accountability around how. So I have this view on tradition. Okay, this is again a very motivational poster as well. Is anybody? I know that my friends from Spain that I was sitting through. So nothing against Spain, but I mean this is an incredible, right? I mean I've been to Spain. It's one of my favorite cities. But just because you've been doing things a certain way, right? It doesn't mean, right? So I agree that you should use Excel and things like that, but you don't have to, right? There are other options, right? And I'm hoping that people might be able to figure out the other options. So when we've talked about this quite a bit, that there are people who worry about controls and risk and audit and fraud and compliance, whether it's in finance, internal audit, or security, and a whole bunch of internal drivers, market drivers. I mean, you've seen this thing, right? I mean, over and over again. It doesn't matter whether it was in 1862 or 2009. It's the same stuff, right? And the only difference is that more and more complexity gets added, and especially with the proliferation of some of these smart mobile devices. The whole concept of where information resides has completely changed. So so to me, every time it's like chasing your own tail. Every time you try to go solve one problem, right? There's another new problem that's been created, And that's why I'm actually fascinated with this notion of innovation. So that's why I had a facetious title that says, oh, 2020 vision, perfect sight. The reality is that most people really don't know what they want. And the ability, and I'll give you actually a perfectly good example. How many of you have iPhones? iPhones, the Apple iPhones. Okay, so about a third of you, okay? Now, it's only been around 3 years, right? But if someone said, 3 years ago, I'd like for you to design a phone, okay, that has no buttons on it, right? As a design specification, right? So I guess Jobs got up there and he said, got his team together and said, I want a phone, but I want a phone to have no buttons on it, right? And I said, what the hell are you talking about? It's like saying, the GM guys getting together, which I thought might happen, by the way, the financial crisis, saying, we need innovation in this country. We got to make cars with no tires. Why not? Saves on gas, right? Maybe there's less friction. We got to figure out a way to do that. I bet you there's someone here taking notes. Does anybody work for a car company? I would love to be involved in that project. Right? It could happen, right? The whole Flintstone thing that happens, right? Quite possible. But when you try to put some constraints, right, or remove constraints, you have the ability, I think, to reframe a particular problem, right? And I do believe that what iPhone has done, right? By the way, it's not a great phone, but it's good for everything else. Would you agree? So, but it's still called the iPhone, but it's fundamentally changed the landscape, right? Of how people play games, how people read, and again, if someone had told you 2 years ago there's going to be 1 billion downloads, not only are people going to buy this phone with no buttons, people are going to download 1 billion applications on that phone in less than 2 years. That's happened. It's true. Right? There's 1 billion application downloads on the iPhone today. So I think when we talk about drivers, I think one of the key concepts that gets left out is the notion of innovation, right? So I'm trying to figure out, right, and being in the space for a long time and having been in the automation space, is there fundamentally something that you could do, right? Other than having a auditor with green glasses and green suit, jumping into a pool of ERP software, and then swimming to go find and dig the exception. Is there fundamentally something that you could do that redefines the space? I don't know what it is yet, but maybe I'll be able to tell you towards the end of the slide. I might have little tricks up my sleeve, but I think the traditional approaches, right, of the stuff that we've talked about, we have talked about for the last 19 years, and the vendors, right, including ourselves, there's been nothing so dramatic, right? So if you look at, it doesn't matter, in fact, any industry that you go to, right? I also, since I can't keep my job for most of the time, I also spend time giving money to other people. As a venture capitalist to invest in other companies as well, which is one of the things that I do, so I can mess up other companies too. But I can mess it up because it's my money, I guess. No, I shouldn't be doing that. The idea of trying to get people to fundamentally transform, right, a particular business or industry has happened, and every time you do it, it turns out that you're actually solving a different problem, right? So in this particular case, even though iPhone wanted to make the phone, they fundamentally redefined what a phone meant. So even though the phone doesn't work that well, people actually are not complaining, right? It's the same problem, I shouldn't say problem, the same love affair people have with Google, right? Now, it's great when you sit down and say, look, I want to be the world's source of all information, but half the stuff that you find on Google is, excuse my Spanish,